so much pressure, right? And I believe I said this before on one of the previous shows that we have. Chris Rock said something that just stays with me. It just stays with me, and I'm going to paraphrase it. He said something to the effect that, only women, children, and pets are truly loved and respected on this planet. It's like for a man, a husband, or a father, there's so much pressure because if you mess up, you're not even considered a man. That woman can mess up, she's still loved as a woman, whether it's a mother or wife, whatever the case is. And he's basically given like a societal view of it. Yeah. I'm not quoting him as if he's, on the same par with scripture or anything like that. But there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. There's a tremendous amount of pressure being a father because you think of the ideas and the concepts of, protection, provision, and if you don't do those things, you yourself don't feel like a man. And what we find ourselves in, thinking about present day, conditions and how things are, there's so many men who didn't have an example of how to provide, how to protect. But, we get into the role of father. And then those wounds just compile because you come face to face with real life. You made some choices now, but here it is. You're facing a lot of trials and tribulations because I can't afford this. And they looking at you as, well, you should be able to. You're supposed to be the provider. You get what I'm saying? And a lot of times we just, we look at certain things, but that's all across the board. You're supposed to provide, financially. You're supposed to provide physically, but you're also supposed to provide spiritually, emotionally, mentally. A lot of men aren't even thinking in terms of spiritually, mentally, and psychologically. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
And so trying to do that, and you yourself having those wounds can really be a problem. Not just for the ones who didn't have the example, but for the ones who did have the example.
Mercy.
Wow. do you get what I'm saying?
Wow. Yeah.
I think I can share this. I remember, my father and I had a really interesting relationship. Of course, when you're young and you're small and whatnot, everything. Daddy is the best. My daddy can beat your daddy. Your daddy is the Hulk. Your daddy is Superman. All that.
Yeah.
And everything was good. I remember some of my earliest fond memories of my father is when he would come in the door from work. So he'd get home about 5, 6, a long day's work. And I'd be hiding behind the door, acting like, and he'd just act like he didn't know I was there. So he'd come in and my mom be sitting in the chair, whatnot. And I'd be like this here, like telling her to be quiet, whatnot. And then he'll come in the house. You're like, I wonder where he would call me Spoke, like that. Yeah. I wonder where Spoke at, whatnot. And then I just come running from behind the door. I'd be, Daddy. And then I run and he'd turn around and I leap into the air and then he just catch me. And then, we just, that's how it was in the beginning.
Right.
Then of course you kind of grow up, whatnot. Growing up, quite naturally, I want to be like my dad. Yeah. I want to be like him. Dad is everything. Then, you get a little older. And at that time, he was in the ministry and he answered the call and he started traveling a lot more. So he started to be gone a lot. I was in my own ministry with the group at the time called the Four Christian Stars. We started traveling. He's traveling and I'm traveling. And so there'd be a lot of time, in my teen years where we be hitting and missing.
Right.
Where we really didn't. And there's a little bit of drifting just from the standpoint of us not seeing each other. Right. There'd be times where it'd probably be like a month before we like really actually saw each other. Right. Like he'd be going off to do a gospel meeting. And back in these days, Nick, they were like actual gospel meetings from Sunday to Friday, not this little Sunday to Wednesday mess.
Right.
Doing he be Sunday going preaching.
Right.
And he be coming back on Friday. But I'd be leaving on Friday, going to sing somewhere. Right. And then I wouldn't be getting back till Monday. He'd be gone again.
Right.
going to do another gospel meeting.
Right. Right. Right.
Coming back on Friday, I'd be going to another place on that Friday. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's a while there where we kind of drifted a little bit. Nothing, serious, like we were having issues with each other, just drifting because we weren't seeing each other. And really the extent of our relationship at that point was just phone calls. It's like, hey, okay, Spoke, you doing all right? All right, that has gone. You the man of the house now, that type stuff. Then got older, and we got back closer again because I'm a man, I'm trying to do this thing. I got married, and we start learning some things, and I love those conversations towards the end. And of course, for those my father passed away in 2002. So towards the end, we started having conversations, like real deep conversations.
Yeah.
And in these conversations, I would learn about some of the things, his wounds.
Wow.
That he had to carry, but I didn't know it because I was a kid. And back then our parents, they certain things, they just kept to themselves, especially men back then. You're a man, you handle it.
That's true.
And they kept those things reserved and things of that nature. And it's just good to have these conversations. Listen, I would encourage anybody. You still have your grandparents, your parents living with you. Talk with them. Like have deep conversations, not the typical hi bye and love you and all that. No, sit down and talk with them and learn about them. So yeah, there were some things that he disclosed in those conversations that I wasn't necessarily privy to. Now a lot of it they were both, and when I say they, I'm talking about both him and my mother. They felt at the time doing right by me and my siblings because we were children, and so some things they would just hold and reserve, kind of keep reserved to themselves. But learning about some of those wounds helps you to kind of look at them in a different light, because who is this? This is my father, preacher, man of God. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm like, okay. I'm like, wow, okay, Dad. Like, you had to carry that? You had to, wow. And I mean, you just have, I know I certainly did, a deeper appreciation for who he was and what he did. And so, yeah, I would certainly just bring that out. When we talk about a father's wounds, it's not just those who didn't have the example. And I got to be honest with you, my father, he didn't grow up with his biological father. Wow. So he, he felt a lot of, those things.
Yeah.
And, I grew up with my father. So, it was different for me. But him carrying those wounds and sharing that with me, like, man, wow.